When police arrived at the house in Bothell, Washington in 2012, they found a message burned into the living room wall. 3 letters that were in this black soot. D-I-E. And the man who called the police was standing in his driveway, barefoot, hands blistered. His girlfriend was still screaming inside. He told police that something had been living in the house with him for 8 months, and that it wanted them dead. His name was Keith Linder, and 8 months earlier, he had no idea what was waiting for him in that house. What's going on, Midnight Mafia? Thank you guys once again for joining me. I truly appreciate it. This story is really crazy, but I know a lot of you love the mountain mysteries and stuff like that. So next week, I got a crazy intense mountain mystery for you. And then the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that, I got banger after banger after banger. So make sure you hit that bell notification to all. I'm serious. These are like once in a lifetime stories that I have lined up over the next 4 months. So without any further ado, as of now, I love y'all. It's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. Okay, so on a cool afternoon in February 2012, Keith Linder stood in the driveway of a modest 2-story house just outside Seattle, Washington. The house was in Bothell, a quiet suburban neighborhood where people knew their neighbors. And, the kids rode bikes in the street. But, just a little foreshadowing, which I hate to do. Bothell is spelled B-O-T-H-E-L-L. I just thought I'd tell you that. So Keith was 48 years old. He worked in technology, the tech field. And he was finally moving in with his girlfriend Tina after years of dating. This felt like a new chapter to him. The rent was reasonable, the landlord seemed nice. The house had 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a backyard with a fence. It was perfect. And Keith was also deeply religious. He'd grown up Baptist, read his Bible every morning, and made sure that before he even unpacked the furniture, he placed a cross in every single room. 1 in the living room above the TV, 1 in the kitchen, 1 in each bedroom. And he kept 3 Bibles in the house at all times. 1 of them was on his nightstand, 1 of them was on the coffee table, and 1 of them he kept deep in the basement. Tina thought it was a little much, but she didn't say anything. That was just Keith. And as they move in, the first month is totally normal. They painted the walls, they hung up pictures. Tina planted flowers in the backyard. Keith set up his home office in 1 of the spare bedrooms. Totally normal. In fact, everything just felt right. But then, early March, Keith started hearing something at night. It sounded like this scratching almost. Like something was dragging its nails across wood. And it was coming from inside the walls. So logically, at first, of course, he thought it was mice. So he set traps. But nothing ever got caught. And the scratching continued. And it always happened at the same time, right around 3 a.m. Keith would wake up, and there it was. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Sometimes right behind his headboard. So he would turn on the light and it would stop. So he turned the light off, and within minutes, it would restart again. And one night, in late March, Keith woke up just after 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. And when he walked past the living room, he stopped. The cross above the TV was upside down, literally like in a movie. And the Bible on the coffee table was open, and he always kept it closed. He always did. So he checked the nail on the wall, and it was tight. There was no way that cross could have flipped on its own. So he tries not to scare himself too much, and he goes back to bed. And when he wakes up the next morning, he tells Tina. And she said maybe, he had bumped into it and didn't even realize. And Keith really didn't argue, but he knew something was off. Then, in early April, Keith came home from work and found every cabinet in the kitchen wide open. Upper cabinets, lower cabinets, the pantry. Tina wasn't even home. And when he called her, she said she'd been at work all day. That night, he set up a camera in the kitchen. And at 3:17 a.m., it happened again. Keith woke up to this loud bang from downstairs, so he ran to the kitchen. Every cabinet again was open. He checked the footage, and what he saw made his stomach turn. At exactly 3:14 a.m., one cabinet door slowly started to open, then another, opening one by one in sequence. No hands, no wires. Then, at 3:17 a.m., one door slammed shut so hard that the camera shook. So, as you could imagine, this is hard to believe, right? But Keith ended up showing the footage the next day to Tina. And she watched it twice. She didn't say anything at first, and then she said, maybe it's the house settling. Everybody always says that, it's settling, which is true. Houses do settle, and they make creaks and all this stuff. And then she said, maybe there's a draft. And Keith kind of just stared at her. A draft does not open cabinets in sequence. A draft doesn't slam a door hard enough to shake a camera. But things got worse. A week later, Keith was just sitting on the couch watching TV when he felt it move. Not a little shift. The entire couch slid 3 feet across the floor. He jumped up and looked around, of course, and no one else was in the room. The couch had just literally moved on its own. And when he looked down at the floor, he could see the drag marks in the carpet. Yes, once again, this is a real story. Later that day, Tina saw the marks, and she could not explain them, obviously. But she also didn't want to talk about it. Just like most people, if they can't control it, they don't even want to think about it. So she started staying at her mom's house just a few nights a week to kind of get it out of her mind. But she said it was because her mom needed help with something. But Keith knew. She was scared. And so was he. And in May, Keith woke up to this new thing. It was a smell. Something burning. So he ran downstairs and he found his Bible on the coffee table smoking. Not on fire, just smoking. Like someone had almost held a lighter to the back of the cover. The edges were singed black. And when he picked it up, it was warm to the touch. He threw it in the sink and turned on the water. And right there, that's when he saw it. On the wall, behind the couch, written in what looked like dark soot, 3 letters, D-I-E. But Keith didn't notice in that moment what else had changed in the room while he slept. So just imagine seeing D-I-E. What would you do? Well, let me know in the comments. Because Keith called the police, and they came. They took photos. They asked if he had any enemies. Keith said no. They asked if anyone else had access to the house. He said no. And they wrote up a report.
It says D-I-E.
One of the officers told Keith that it looked like it was just a prank. Maybe some kids broke in. But Keith had checked every door and window before calling. Everything was locked from the inside. So they left, and Keith knew what they were thinking, that he had done it himself. But that's when Keith started posting his videos online. The cabinet footage, the couch moving, photos of the burned Bible, photos of the writing on the wall. And the comments, of course, came flooding in.
Fake, staged attention seeker.
A popular ghost hunting channel did a breakdown video calling Keith a fraud. So Keith reached out to local paranormal investigators, and most of them just ignored him. So he contacted priests, and one of them came to the house, looked around for 10 minutes, and said that they did not sense anything evil. He suggested that Keith go and see a therapist. So Keith called the landlord about an exorcism, and the landlord said no. While all this is going on, Tina moves out in June. She packed her things while Keith was at work and left a note on the counter. Keith knew what that meant. She believed him, and she couldn't handle it anymore. And now Keith was alone in this house. He'd sit on that couch, the same couch that slid across the floor, and realized he had no one to call, nobody who believed him at all. The police thought that he was staging it. The internet thought that he was a liar. Tina was gone. The priest wouldn't help. And whatever was in the house with him knew it. Keith wasn't scared of ghosts anymore. He was scared of losing his mind, of becoming the guy everybody laughed at. So he prayed harder. He slept less. He ate almost nothing. And he'd lost 15 pounds in just 2 months. His hands would shake when he tried to type at work. His boss would ask if everything was okay at home, and Keith just said yes, but it wasn't, because every night at 3 a.m. the whispers came back, and the activity got worse. He'd come home to find furniture now fully rearranged. He'd hear footsteps walking circles around his bed at night. He'd wake up to the sound of someone whispering his name. And it always happened at 3 a.m. Always. Then one night in July, Keith was lying in bed when he heard it. His name, whispered right next to his ear. Keith. He didn't move. He didn't open his eyes. He just laid there waiting for it to stop. But then he felt something. It was this pressure that was on his chest, like someone was pressing down on him. He couldn't breathe. He tried to move his arms, but they wouldn't respond. And then he heard it again, louder this time. He forced his eyes open, and he looked at the foot of his bed. And that's when he saw something standing there watching him sleep. And what it was, well, it was a shadow. Tall, dark, humanoid, but wrong. It had no features, just a shape. And it was staring at him. Keith screamed, and the shadow didn't move. It just stood there, watching. Let me know in the comments right now if this is when you would move, or if you would have already moved. Because at this point, the thing leaned forward, closer to Keith's face. And that's when Keith ran. Literally, he grabbed his phone and he ran out of the house barefoot. He sat in his car until sunrise. And when he finally went back inside, he found something new on his wall. Not D-I-E this time, something worse, written in that same black soot. It said, "I'm not done." So Keith didn't know what to do. His lease wasn't up until 2013. He'd already lost Tina. He lost credibility, and nobody in Seattle would help him. He was completely alone. He was broke. He was terrified. And whatever was in that house knew it. But then in August, Keith woke up to find a message in his inbox. "You've got mail." It was from a man named Steve Mera. And the subject line read, "You're not crazy, but you are in danger." Steve was a paranormal investigator from the UK. He'd been researching cases in the Pacific Northwest and came across Keith's videos. He said he had seen a lot of fakes in his 30 years of investigating. And he said that Keith's videos looked fake too. They looked fake. But there was something about them that bothered him. Little details that didn't add up if Keith was staging everything. Steve said he had investigated over 300 cases, and only twice had he seen activity like what Keith was documenting. Both times the people involved ended up in the hospital. So Steve wanted to come to Seattle with his partner Don Phillips, and they wanted to stay in the house for a few days and see for themselves. And if Keith was telling the truth, they would help him. But if he was lying, they would expose him. And Keith said yes, immediately. And then Steve and Dawn flew in on August 23rd, 2012. They brought EMF meters, infrared cameras, and audio recorders. They set everything up and told Keith just to act normal. Just go about your day. And they would, monitor the equipment and see what happened. And the first night, nothing happened. Steve and Dawn sat in the living room watching the meters. Everything was quiet. They told Keith that was normal. Most hauntings don't perform on command. So Keith went to bed around midnight and Steve and Dawn stayed up. At 3:11 in the morning, Steve looked down at his watch and yawned. He was about to suggest that they call it a night when every single EMF meter in the house started screaming all at once. So Steve and Dawn jumped up and grabbed their cameras. Their meters were spiking. The readings were off the charts. And then they heard it. A loud crash from the basement. So they ran downstairs and found books scattered all over the floor. An entire bookshelf had been emptied. And the books weren't just on the ground. They were thrown. Some were 15 feet away from the shelf. Steve and Dawn checked their cameras. The footage showed the books flying off the shelf one by one. No hands, no wires, just flying, which is impossible, right? And then we get to the audio recorder. They heard something. A voice. It was faint, but it was clear. And it said,
"Get out."
They played it back for Keith the next morning, and Keith's face went white. Because the voice on the recording sounded exactly like Keith. And over the next 3 nights, they recorded more voices. Dawn was in the basement adjusting a camera when he heard scratches right above him. He looked up at the ceiling and saw something dark crawling across the beams. This is getting crazy and scary. He said it was something that moved wrong. He backed out and then wouldn't go down there again. And when Steve asked what he saw, Dawn just shook his head. He said he saw it and that was enough. On the 4th night, every light bulb in the house shattered at the same time. All of them. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, basement. Steve and Dawn were standing in the dark with glass all around them. And that's when they heard it again, the whispering. Keith, 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 over and over and over. On the 5th day, Steve and Dawn packed up their equipment and left. And before they got in their rental car, Steve turned to Keith. He put his hand on Keith's shoulder, and his voice was quiet, almost like he didn't want the house to hear him. And he said, quote,
"In 30 years, I've never seen anything like this. It knows your name, it knows you're alone, and it's not going to stop."
Keith then asked what it wanted, and Steve didn't have an answer. He just got in the car and he drove away. So Keith ended up moving out. In September 2012, it's like the house won. He broke his lease and paid the penalty. He didn't care. He just needed to leave. He moved into a small apartment across town and tried to rebuild his life. But it wasn't over. He still heard the whisper sometimes. He still woke up at 3 a.m. for no reason. And on those nights, he would check his walls just in case, and his health started to decline again. Migraines this time. Plus anxiety and insomnia, and he would have these panic attacks in the middle of grocery stores. His doctor couldn't find anything physically wrong with him. But Keith knew whatever had been in that house had broken something inside him that could not be fixed. So, Steve Mera and Dawn Phillips published their findings in a report called the Bothell House. They included photos, video, and audio evidence. They concluded that the activity in Keith's house was genuine and possibly demonic in nature. The report got some attention in paranormal circles, but most people still did not believe it. The house in Bothell is still there. It's been rented several times since Keith left, but tenants never stay long. Some leave just after a week or two. Others make it a month or two. The landlord eventually stopped asking why people kept breaking their leases, and he just started offering shorter rental terms. Keith Linder still lives in Washington. He wrote a book about his experience. He does interviews sometimes, and he always says the same thing. Whatever was in that house followed me. I still hear it. I still see it. And I don't think it's ever gonna leave me alone. And the last thing written on Keith's wall before he moved out was, "I'm not done." The house in Bothell is still there. You can look it up. The address is public. The landlord still lists it online if you want to stay there. But if you decide to stay there, just remember what that demon told Keith before he left. "I'm not done." Guys, this case is extremely scary, and it's more scary because it's real. And that's what we do here at Mystery Files. We tell real, scary, true crime stories, mystery stories, paranormal stories, mountain mysteries, all of it. So if you like that, please hit the subscribe button. Make sure to like this. Let's get this up to 200 likes. You can do it. I have faith in you. But please, if you want to, continue and catch up on something you missed this one right here, and you don't want to miss this one. Nobody does. But I love you guys, and I'll see you next week. That's all I got for you today. Cheers.